I came back after months on a business trip to find a for sale sign in the yard. Confused, I called my parents. My mother laughed. We sold the house. Find a new place. Stunned, I asked, what about my stuff? She snickered. Threw it all away. My sister laughed in the background. I took a deep breath and said, fine, but don't regret i.e. Then, I hung up. Eleanor Davis couldn't remember the last time she laughed. Perhaps her smile had gradually disappeared from her face during days consumed by work. Her reputation as an architect was unshakable. With her sensitive intuition and reliable skills, she earned her clients' deep trust, and her career progressed smoothly. However, outside of work, her life was colored by complicated family relationships that had existed since childhood. Eleanor's parents were people who always prioritized their own desires. Her mother, Margaret, wished above all to shine in social circles, while her father, Harold, devoted his life to gambling and investments, which were nothing more than bets. What they had in common was a lack of financial sense and indifference to how their actions affected those around them. Eleanor, you always have such a serious face. You should learn to enjoy life more, her mother had repeatedly told her since childhood. Margaret never tried to understand the difference between enjoying life and wasteful spending. If Eleanor worried about household finances, she was dismissed as a boring child, and if she mentioned preparing for the future, she was labeled a worrier. Meanwhile, Eleanor's sister Pamela grew up as the darling of both parents. She inherited Margaret's beauty and Harold's sociability, making her the ideal daughter in their eyes. Pamela was given whatever she wanted, her failures were always forgiven, and her successes were excessively praised. She continued living a luxurious life under her parents' protection. Pamela is just enjoying life. Why don't you loosen up a bit too, they would say, while quietly handling Pamela's expensive credit card bills and the costs incurred by her mistakes. And ultimately, much of this financial burden fell heavily on Eleanor's shoulders. The only one in the family who truly understood Eleanor was her grandmother Rosalind. With her gentle smile and sharp insight, Rosalind was concerned about her son and daughter-in-law's financial irresponsibility, and the difference in how they treated their granddaughters. Eleanor, you have a special strength. Someday it will save you. Rosalind had been saying this since Eleanor was 10 years old. Her grandmother's house was filled with the tranquility absent from her parents' home. The old furniture and antique items weren't just expensive, each had its own story. Eleanor loved sitting on her grandmother's knee and hearing where each item came from and what memories it held. Objects have souls, Eleanor. Especially those that have been loved. Rosalind's words deeply influenced Eleanor's philosophy as an architect. When her grandmother passed away, Eleanor was in college. According to the will, Rosalind's house and many cherished items were entrusted to Eleanor. However, her parents tried to dispose of most of them, calling them outdated. Eleanor desperately protected her grandmother's keepsakes, and the blue sapphire pendant known as the Davis family jewel became her most treasured possession. Someday, you'll understand the true value of this jewel. Rosalind's final words were deeply etched in Eleanor's heart. After graduating from college, Eleanor joined an architectural firm and eventually became independent. Throughout this time, she tried to cherish her connection with her family. She took on their debts whenever they accumulated more, helped with Pamela's college expenses and loan payments, and even assisted with her parents' medical bills. She never asked for anything in return. She simply wanted to preserve the concept of family, along with her memories of her grandmother. 3 months ago, Eleanor was scheduled for a long business trip to Europe for a major project that could shape her career. Though worried, she asked her parents to look after her house and departed. Over the phone, her parents cheerfully assured her, of course, everything will be fine. Eleanor planned to resolve her parents' new debt issues upon her return. Before leaving, she touched her grandmother's pendant against her chest and quietly whispered, "I'll be back." Her work in the distant location went smoothly. However, occasionally she was struck by strange feelings of anxiety, as if her grandmother was trying to tell her something. On the flight home, Eleanor imagined reuniting with her family. She had mixed emotions, but still loved them. And no matter how difficult, she wanted to preserve her family bonds. Dragging her fatigue from the long flight, Eleanor dozed in the backseat of a taxi. Familiar streetscapes flowed past the window. Her 3-month absence seemed to have given a fresh color to her eyes. The large elm trees on Maple Street were beginning to change color, announcing the arrival of autumn. "Almost there," said the driver. Eleanor smiled, savoring the joy of coming home. The project had been successful, with excellent feedback from the client. Now she could have some time to rest. She also needed time to seriously discuss her parents' financial situation. When the taxi stopped in front of her house, Eleanor doubted her eyes at first. "Is this the right place?" the driver asked. "Yes," Eleanor answered in shock. There was a large for sale sign on the lawn in front of her house. Below it was the name of a real estate company with a sold sticker already attached. "This must be some mistake," she murmured to herself. After paying the fare, she stood in front of the house, dragging her heavy suitcase. This was unmistakably her house. The white two-story colonial-style house inherited from her grandmother was the center of Eleanor's life. As she approached the front door, she noticed the lock had been changed. Her key didn't fit. Her heart began to race. Suppressing her panic, Eleanor took out her mobile phone and dialed her mother's number. After 3 rings, Margaret's cheerful voice answered. "Oh, Eleanor. You're finally back. Mom, there's a for sale sign in front of the house. What's going on?" Eleanor tried to remain calm. "Oh, yes." Margaret's voice bubbled with excitement. "We sold the house. Got a good price for it. Sorry, you'll have to find a new place to live." Eleanor couldn't believe her ears. "What are you talking about? The house is in my name. There's no way you could sell it." "Oh, your father took care of all the paperwork. There were some legal documents or something. Anyway, it's already sold. The new owners are moving in next weekend." Alarms rang in Eleanor's head. With a trembling voice, she asked, "What happened to my belongings?" "Oh," that Margaret sighed. "We threw everything away. Your old-fashioned things were just in the way. Those clothes you hadn't worn in years, that mountain of old books, and that box of keepsakes from your grandmother. We got rid of it all." Eleanor's chest tightened. She remembered the wooden box containing mementos from her grandmother, family photos, and most importantly, her grandmother's will. "What about grandmother's pendant?" Eleanor's voice trembled. "Oh, that outdated thing with the blue stone? Of course," Pamela said. "Who would ever wear something like that?" From the other end of the phone, Eleanor could hear Pamela's voice. "Eleanor? You're back. We had a wonderful party while you were away. Everyone had a great time." Eleanor sank down on the front steps. It felt as if her entire life had crumbled away in those 3 months. Thinking about the pendant her grandmother had clutched in her final moments, the one called the Davis family jewel, made her chest constrict. "Why?" She couldn't continue. "You're not angry, are you?" Margaret's voice mixed with slight anxiety. "You always give us money anyway. We thought you'd buy us a new house. Besides, we were able to pay off Pamela's debts with the proceeds from this house sale." The memory of the last day with her grandmother flashed in Eleanor's mind. On her deathbed, Rosalind had gripped her hand, trying to tell her something. "Protect the Davis house, the truth is." Her grandmother's words had trailed off unfinished. "What debts?" Eleanor asked. "Oh, Pamela lost a bit on some investments, and your father's medical bills piled up." Eleanor took a deep breath. She heard something break decisively within her. It was the sound of the family bond she had cherished for so many years. "I understand." Her voice was strangely calm. "But don't regret this." "What do you mean?" Margaret laughed. "I didn't think you'd be so angry. You usually forgive everything." Eleanor hung up without another word. The autumn wind caressed her cheeks. She stood in front of the house for a long time. This house that had been protected through 3 generations. This place that her grandmother had cherished until the end. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes but quickly dried. "I couldn't protect what needed protecting." As she whispered this, her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was a message from Deborah, one of Eleanor's few friends, and also a capable lawyer. "How was Europe? Let me know when you're back." Eleanor stared at the message. Then, slowly, she stood up. "This isn't the end," she said quietly, but with firm determination. This was just the beginning. Deborah Schwartz's law office was on the 5th floor of an old stone building in the center of town. When Eleanor appeared at the reception, the secretary Janet stood up with a surprised look. "Eleanor, when did you get back?" "Yesterday." Eleanor displayed a tired smile. "Is Deborah available? I have an urgent matter to discuss." Janet must have sensed something in her expression because she immediately picked up the intercom. A few minutes later, Eleanor was shown into Deborah's office. "It's been 3 months." Deborah stood up and embraced her, but quickly clouded her expression when she saw Eleanor's face. "What happened?" Eleanor sat down and told her everything that had happened yesterday. Deborah listened silently, occasionally taking notes, sometimes frowning. "So, your parents sold your house without permission and disposed of all your belongings?" Deborah summarized the facts. "But the house was in your name, wasn't it?" "It was left to me in my grandmother's will." Eleanor nodded. "But my mother said, your father took care of all the paperwork. Apparently there were some legal documents." Deborah thought deeply. "Transferring property ownership requires formal procedures. It should be impossible without your signature." She began typing on her computer keyboard. "Let's check the property records." A few minutes later her expression changed. "Eleanor, according to the property records, ownership was transferred from you to your parents 5 years ago." "What?" Eleanor raised her voice. "That's impossible. I never signed anything. Here's the record." Deborah turned the screen to show her. "There's a signature too." Eleanor stared at the screen. There was indeed a signature, but it clearly wasn't hers. "This is a forgery," she said in a trembling voice. Deborah nodded quietly. "That's highly likely. Do you have a copy of your grandmother's will? Eleanor made a bitter face. I kept it in the wooden box, but my parents said they threw everything away. It might still be found, Deborah said calmly. First, we need to prove the fraudulent transfer of ownership. We need strong evidence on our side. But how? Eleanor looked perplexed. Let's contact the lawyer who handled your grandmother's will. They should have a copy. Deborah picked up the phone. And we also need to track down what happened to your property. From that day, Eleanor's legal battle began. With Deborah's help, she tracked down the law firm that had handled her grandmother Rosalind's will. However, they hit another wall there. I'm sorry, but some of our files were lost in a fire 5 years ago, the elderly lawyer Morris said. Mrs. Davis's will was among them. Deborah and Eleanor exchanged glances. It was a coincidence that seemed too convenient. Are there any other records? Deborah asked. Morris pondered. Actually, he said hesitantly. Mrs. Rosalind was a very cautious person. She should have also left a copy of her will with a notary public. Based on this lead, the two began a new search. Meanwhile, Eleanor was also looking for her belongings that had supposedly been thrown away. You should check with local antique dealers and charities, Deborah suggested. If your parents disposed of your things, there should be traces somewhere. Eleanor made phone calls late into the night every evening. She contacted dozens of shops and organizations, repeatedly describing her cherished items. She described her grandmother's pendant in particular detail. It's a blue sapphire, surrounded by silver filigree. The initials RD are engraved on the back. On the third night, an unexpected call came. Is this Eleanor Davis? It was an unfamiliar man's voice. I'm Martin Greenberg, owner of Treasures of the Past, an antique shop. Some of the items you're looking for might have been brought to our store. The next morning, Eleanor visited the antique shop with Deborah. The white-haired proprietor brought a large cardboard box from the back room. A middle-aged gentleman and a young woman brought these in last week. They said they were old things they no longer needed. Eleanor opened the box and checked the contents. Inside were her old albums, her grandmother's keepsake box, and diaries from her student days. I judged most of them to have no value, so I didn't buy them, Martin continued. But I thought it would be a shame to throw them away, so I kept them. Then I saw your advertisement. Thank you so much, Eleanor teared up. However, the most precious blue sapphire pendant wasn't there. In the box, Eleanor found her grandmother's jewelry box. There was no key, but she managed to open it with a thin pin. Inside, along with old photographs, was an envelope. This is as Eleanor opened the envelope with trembling hands, she found a letter written in her grandmother's handwriting and copies of legal documents. Dear Eleanor, when you read this letter, you may be facing difficulties. This house and all the property are yours alone. No matter what Harold and Margaret say, this is the truth. The attached documents are proof. I believe in your strength. With love, Rosalind. Deborah checked the documents and her eyes shone. This is decisive evidence. It's a formal transfer of ownership certificate dated before the forged documents. Eleanor picked up a photo of her grandmother. Rosalind's wise eyes seemed to still be watching over her. She knew that someday my parents might do something like this, Deborah said in a resolute voice. Now, let's move to the next step. We'll invalidate the fraudulent sale and get your house back. Eleanor nodded quietly. Her battle had only just begun, but now, she had a message from her grandmother, and documents proving the truth. Grandma Rosalind, I will protect your house, Eleanor vowed in her heart. This is the notice from the court. Deborah handed Eleanor the document. The house sale contract has been recognized as based on fraudulent transfer of ownership, and has been legally invalidated. Eleanor gazed out the office window. Autumn had deepened, and the street trees were colored red and yellow. It had taken over a month for the court's decision to be reached. During that time, she had continued living in a hotel, spending her days gathering fragments of her lost past. Will the buyer be compensated for damages? Eleanor asked worriedly. You don't need to pay, Deborah shook her head. The court has determined that the real estate agent involved in the fraudulent transaction and your father, who allegedly created the forged documents, will bear the responsibility. Father? Eleanor was at a loss for words. She didn't want to resent her father. However, the fact that he had forged his own daughter's signature left a deep wound in her heart. And this too, Deborah handed over an envelope, the keys to your house. From today, you can officially return to your home. Eleanor took the keys and felt their weight. These weren't just house keys, they were a symbol of reclaiming her life. Thank you, Deborah. She hugged her friend. Without you, I would surely have. You're a strong woman, Eleanor. Deborah squeezed her shoulder tightly. Your grandmother knew that too, I suppose. As Eleanor left the office, her cell phone rang. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. She took a deep breath and answered. Eleanor? Margaret's voice was distraught. What have you done? We received a notice from the court. I can't believe the house sale has been invalidated. The buyers were already preparing to move in. Eleanor replied calmly, "Mom, that house was in my name. The court has recognized that Dad forged my signature to transfer ownership." "That's ridiculous." Margaret's voice trembled. "Harold, are you hearing what Eleanor is saying?" From the other end of the phone, her father's voice could be heard. "Eleanor, let's talk this through. Selling your house without permission was wrong. But we had our reasons." "What reasons?" Eleanor pressed. "Reasons to throw away all my precious memories too?" After a moment of silence, her father said in a low voice, "We needed the money. Pamela, she's accumulated large debts. And my medical bills have become expensive too. Why didn't you tell me?" Sadness mixed in Eleanor's voice. "I've always helped you, haven't I? You were away on business." Margaret began making excuses. "And besides, you always blame us." "Blame you?" Eleanor said in disbelief. "When have I ever blamed you?" She cut off her words. She realized there was no point in arguing. "Anyway, the house has been returned to me," she said firmly. "I'm on my way to get it now. But what will we do?" Margaret's voice sounded like she was about to cry. "We've already spent the proceeds from the sale." Eleanor fell silent for a moment. "Before my trip, I was planning to take care of Dad's medical bills and your debts. But now, it will take time to rebuild trust." After hanging up, Eleanor took a taxi to her house. When the driver dropped her off, she paused in front of the entrance. The for sale sign was still standing, but the sold sticker had been removed. Inserting the key and opening the door, she found the house empty. The furniture had been sold, and the photos that had hung on the walls were gone. Eleanor slowly toured the rooms, feeling the emptiness but gradually regaining her composure. "My home," she murmured. Suddenly the doorbell rang. When Eleanor opened it, her sister Pamela was standing there. Her eyes were red, and her makeup was smudged. "May I come in?" Pamela asked in a small voice. Eleanor silently stepped aside. Pamela entered the living room and looked around at the empty room. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, "for throwing away your things, for what I said on the phone, for everything." Eleanor said nothing. "Our parents were really in trouble," Pamela continued. "I lost a lot of money at the casino, and Dad's heart surgery was expensive." She began to cry. "But that's no excuse, is it?" Eleanor finally spoke. "What happened to Grandmother's pendant?" Pamela lowered her eyes. "I sold it to a high-end jewelry store." Pain shot through Eleanor's chest. The most precious keepsake from Grandma Rosalind, the pendant called the Davis family jewel. Her grandmother's last words echoed in her ears again. "What's the name of the jewelry store?" Eleanor quietly asked. "Green's Jewelry," Pamela answered in a small voice. "It might have been sold already." Eleanor walked silently to the window. The setting sun was painting the western sky red. "There's one more thing I want to say," Pamela approached her. "Our parents said they might see you over this. But I'll stop them." Eleanor turned around. "Why? You've done more than enough for us." Tears glistened in Pamela's eyes. "I should have realized it sooner." That night, Eleanor slept on a mattress laid on the floor. In the empty house, she felt a strange peace. From tomorrow, she would buy new furniture and gradually reclaim her home. The next morning, she visited Green's Jewelry. After hearing her story, the proprietor Joseph Green shook his head in dismay. "That pendant was sold to a collector last week. It fetched a high price because it was such a rare sapphire." Eleanor's hopes were dashed. "However," Joseph continued, "but let me talk to the buyer. If I explain the circumstances." 3 days later, Joseph contacted her. The collector had understood the situation and agreed to return the pendant. The only condition was full refund of the purchase price. Eleanor agreed without hesitation. On the day she received the pendant, Eleanor stood before her grandmother's photograph and held the blue sapphire to her chest. "Grandma Rosalind, I was able to protect your house." Tears rolled down her cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness, but of release. Through this experience, Eleanor had re-examined the true meaning of family. Blood ties are important, but they aren't the only bonds. Trust, respect, and caring for each other. Without these, the word family becomes empty. Eleanor put on the pendant and basked in the morning sunlight streaming through the window. She was ready to quietly step forward into the new life that was beginning. It might be a journey with pain, but she was no longer alone. A year later in spring, the white colonial house on Maple Street had been transformed beyond recognition. Eleanor had used her skills as an architect to renovate her grandmother's house, using the first floor as her own architectural office. In the spacious area filled with bright light, her design drawings and models were displayed, and young aspiring architects came and went. "Your next client is at 2, Eleanor." Her assistant Kate handed her the schedule. Eleanor nodded and looked out the window. The roses her grandmother had loved were beginning to bloom beautifully again this year. Her life had moved in a new direction. The establishment of the Rosalind Foundation was a major turning point for her. It was a small foundation Eleanor created to support people who, like herself, had lost precious mementos. Deborah the lawyer also collaborated, providing legal support. We had 3 new inquiries this week, Deborah reported at last week's meeting, all in similar situations. Improper disposal of property by family members. Over the past year, Eleanor had met many people, and learned that her experience wasn't unique, and those encounters had brought her a new family. Support group gatherings held monthly at her house were filled with warm conversations and laughter. The situation with her parents and sister had changed dramatically. Harold and Margaret were held accountable for the fraudulent transaction, and had to pay substantial compensation. Their luxurious lifestyle ended, and all drifted away when her financial situation changed. 3 months ago, Margaret called. "Eleanor, would you come for Christmas dinner?" Her mother's voice had lost its former arrogance. "We all want to see you." Eleanor declined. The wounds hadn't healed yet. However, last week, she sent a small gift to her parents' apartment. It was a photograph of her grandmother and a short letter. "Someday, we may be able to talk again." It wasn't complete forgiveness, but it was a small beginning. Today, Eleanor had a special plan. From the evening, she was scheduled to launch a new project with the members of the Rosalind Foundation to search for lost mementos. They would build a system to monitor the internet, antique dealers, and auction sites. On her desk lay the blue sapphire pendant. Eleanor picked it up and held it up to the light. "A new beginning," she whispered. On the room's bookshelf, her grandmother's photo albums, which she had recovered, were carefully displayed. Eleanor opened one and gazed at the young Rosalind's smile. Beginnings and endings are always in our own choices. Outside the window, the spring breeze carried new life. Eleanor smiled and hung the pendant around her neck. Her journey was still continuing.